Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about the human digestive system and secretory system. The first one that we want to talk about is the human body organization, which is cell, tissues, organ, and organ system, going from the smallest living part to the largest, which is an organism. And then we want to talk about the four different types of tissues. There is the epithelial tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue, and muscle tissue. It's easy for you to understand what the nervous tissue is. That's just your neurons all throughout your body and in your brain. And then you have the muscle tissues. Those are your muscles. So most of you guys are athletes, so you understand how muscles work. And then the next one is the epithelial tissue. The epithelial tissue is basically the skin. So anytime you have skin, you can think about the epithelial tissue, the outside skin and the inside skin. So going from your mouth, for example, your skin doesn't end right here, right? There's no break in between this mouth. Your lips are still the skin, and then it keeps going into your throat and all the way in your digestive tract. So the lining of your digestive tract is also the epithelial tissue. All right, the next one that we want to talk about is the connective tissue. So the connective tissue is anything basically that doesn't belong in the nervous tissue, muscle tissue, or epithelial tissue categories. So the connective tissue could be the fat and other paddings such as your tendon, your bones, your blood cell. All of those could be the connective tissue. So let's run over this one more time. Epithelial tissue is your lining of the skin and the stomach. The connective tissues could be, let's see, we have some underskin connective tissue, blood, bones, cartilage. These are your fat cells and some other tendons. Then we have the nervous tissue and the muscle tissue. What you need to remember about the muscle tissues is that some you can control and some you cannot control. So for example, the smooth muscle in your throat, those allows you to swallow food. And then you have the cardiac muscle in your heart, which you cannot control. They will contract and allow your heartbeats to keep on happening whether you want it or not. The next one is, how does liver help maintain homeostasis? So the liver stores blood sugar when the glucose level is too high and release glucose when the blood glucose level is low. So if you can remember from last semester, and as we reviewed in class, glucose is important for cell respiration. So in order for us to have glucose at all time, even when you're not eating, is by our liver storing some of the glucose so that we can use it when we're not actively eating. So this chart right here, you have to understand how this works. I will likely provide you this picture, but I want you to read the picture and then tell me what's happening, okay? So we have a normal blood glucose level. In class, we talk about positive regulation, positive feedback versus negative feedback. So positive feedback is when you have a level of something, and when it's higher, it goes even higher. So for example, if you're accelerating with your car and you keep on accelerating even more, that will be a positive feedback. If you're braking and then you brake even more, that's also a positive feedback. Basically, the direction is going the same way. Higher and even higher, lower and even lower. However, most of your body parts try to maintain homeostasis, where we maintain a certain level of whatever, a certain level of water, a certain level of blood glucose level, a certain level of concentration of, how thick your blood is, the amount of blood pressure, for example. So we want to maintain this level. So how we can maintain this? If the level is too high, then we'll make it lower. And if the level is too low, then we'll make it higher. This process is called negative feedback because the response, this is a response, is opposite of the signal, right? So what we see right here is the maintaining of a blood glucose level using negative feedback. So when the blood glucose level goes up when you eat, this is your pancreas. Your pancreas will release a hormone called insulin. And insulin does two main things. One is to increase glucose uptake by all of your cells that needs glucose, for example, these muscles, so that they can produce a lot of energy. And then the insulin will also allow the liver to store away the glucose. And by storing away the glucose and using up the glucose, the result is the blood glucose will then go down. The effect is the opposite of the stimulus. It will go down until the blood sugar level goes back to the normal homeostatic level. And then the next one is if the blood glucose level goes down when you're not eating, for example, as when you're sleeping, the pancreas will then release a chemical, a hormone called glucagon, and this glucagon will allow your liver to release glucose into the blood so that the blood glucose level can go back up to the normal amount, which is the homeostasis. And then we learn all of this. So next is food and nutrients. Why do we need to eat? You need to receive chemical energy from food to produce ATP so that all your cells can do work, right? So when you think about the cell respiration process, that process produces a lot of ATP, but also in order for cell respiration to happen, there also needs to be the ATP present in the first place. So you need ATP in every single one of your cells for a lot of things. So that's why you need. And then the food supplies raw material for your body that your body needs to build and repair tissues as well, right? As you're growing, whether you're growing taller or fatter or in whichever direction that you're growing, these growing material needs to come from somewhere, right? Those material don't just come from nowhere. They have to come from food. Now, the next one is the 6 nutrients your body needs. We have water, carbohydrates, fat, protein, vitamins, and minerals. Those are just some basic things that you should know about. Now we're going to talk about the digestive system. So what is the function of the digestive system? The function of the digestive system is to break down food into smaller pieces, and then we want to absorb the nutrients so that you can live. So food is processed in 4 phases. The first phase is ingestion, where you eat the food in your mouth. You take the food into your mouth. The next step is digestion, where we actually break down the food into smaller pieces. And then we have absorption, where we can absorb the nutrients into the bloodstream so that all those nutrients can be carried all around our body. And then lastly, we have elimination, where we get rid of the waste that our body doesn't need. So this one right here shows you the 4th step one more time: ingestion, eating the food; digestion, breaking down the food; absorption, intaking of the nutrient into the bloodstream; and elimination, getting rid of waste. So ingestion is pretty easy. You eat, and as soon as the food goes into your mouth, digestion happens, where food becomes smaller pieces, whether you want it or not. Even if you're not chewing on something, right? The food will still digest and being broken down into smaller pieces, even when you're not chewing. So there are 2 types of digestion. One is called mechanical digestion, and one is called chemical digestion. The mechanical digestion allows you to break down large pieces of food into smaller pieces. So when you actually chew on the food, and your mouth can feel the food becoming smaller pieces, that's called mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion is when there are enzymes in your mouth that break down the food into even smaller molecules. So this is something that you can't even feel, and you can't even see the really, really tiny molecules. There's chemical reactions going on to break down the food into really tiny pieces. So here it shows you again a physical, or it's also called mechanical digestion, is when you break down the burger into smaller pieces. And then chemical digestion is, for example, we have very large carbohydrates such as starch, and then the digestive enzyme will break it down chemically by going through chemical reactions. We're actually breaking the bonds. So the physical mechanical digestion does not break, chemical bonds. It's just splitting the food into smaller pieces. So the steps of digestion involve a whole bunch of organs. First off, the food will come into your mouth. That's pretty easy to understand. The next one is the esophagus, which passes down the food from your mouth into your stomach. The next one, the next one is your stomach, and then we have the small intestine. The small intestine is where a lot of the absorption of the food happens. And then lastly, we have the large intestine. So on this picture, what you can see, we have the mouth, esophagus, that's really long. It's basically a highway for food. Not a lot is going on besides passing the food down. And then we have the stomach right here. Stomach right here to grind up the food even more and do more digestion. And we have the small intestine all windy, doing all those absorption. And then we have the large intestine right here. So the first step we want to talk about is the mouth. Mouth breaks down sizes of the food. So this is talking about the mechanical digestion. So on your paper, if you're taking notes right now, please write down mechanical digestion. And the mouth also releases amylase to digest starch. So amylase is an enzyme that actually goes through chemical reactions to break down starch into even smaller carbohydrates. So this process is the chemical digestion. Make sure you remember that mouth does both mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. The next one is the esophagus. As you can see, we have this ball of food traveling down your esophagus and into the stomach. Okay, so food travels down the esophagus into the stomach using contractions of smooth muscle. This process is also called peristalsis. So this process, there is no digestion happening at all. There's no absorption happening either. The only thing that's happening is the esophagus is passing the food from the mouth into the stomach. The next one is your stomach. Your stomach does both the chemical digestion and the mechanical digestion. So what you see right here, those are chemical digestion, and then this grinding of the stomach is the mechanical digestion. So here we go. The stomach has an acidic condition, so that acid is breaking down food chemically and can perform both chemical and mechanical digestion of food. Pepsin breaks protein into smaller polypeptide. So if you can remember, protein is a long chain of amino acids, right? So that's called polypeptide. But the pepsin cuts up the polypeptide even more. And then we have chyme is produced. So the chyme is kind of the grind up, all processed ball of food. So make sure you remember that the stomach does also both the chemical digestion and the mechanical digestion. Next one, we have the small intestine. So the small intestine does most of the chemical digestion, and you want to add right here on your paper, most of the chemical digestion and absorption, because as you can see, the small intestine is really, really long, right? There are a lot of blood vessels right outside the small intestine, which allows the absorption of the nutrients into your bloodstream so that nutrient can be carried all around your body. So chyme, which is the ball of grind up food, is pushed through the small intestine right here to allow most of the chemical digestion. Okay? And then the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder, those are three organs that release a lot of chemicals into the small intestine to assist the digestion process, to assist the chemical reactions even more. The next one we have is large intestine. So the large intestine absorbs water and several vitamins as undigested material, and waste is eliminated from the body. So for the large intestine, you want to think in two different steps. One, there's the reabsorption of water, and there's a reabsorption of the absorption of some vitamins. And then there is also the elimination of waste from your body, and you can see the large intestine right here. So here is an overview of everything that we went over. So make sure you don't memorize don't memorize all these steps. Think about what makes sense, right? We start from the mouth, and then the next one has to be a tube of some sort, so that's our esophagus, and then the next one, the stomach, and then we have small and large intestine. And then think about what can happen at each one of those steps. Take a look at this one more time. So ask yourself these questions. What kind of digestion is done at the mouth? What kind of digestion is done at the stomach or at any of these places, right? And you can also ask yourself, what are the places in your body that does chemical digestions, and what are the places that do mechanical digestions? The next one is we want to look at the small intestine one more time. Within your small intestine, there are a lot of these folds, and then within each one of those folds, there are these hair-like structures, but they're really, just structures on the cell that are on the surface of your small intestine. So these folds, these tiny folds, are called villi, and these big folds are just folds. So the reason why there are all these folds and villi existing is because they increase the amount of surface area exposed to the food in the small intestine, which allows a ton of absorption. All of those surface areas are able to allow the foods to get absorbed into your small intestine. So now we want to talk about the excretory system. This is pretty much just an overview of this. We're not going to go in as deep as the digestive system. The excretory system is to excrete metabolic waste. Metabolic means all those chemical reactions, whether we're making new molecules or breaking down molecules, all of those reactions release a lot of waste in your body, and you have to get rid of it. And then we also want to maintain homeostasis of water and get rid of waste and make sure our blood composition is right. Okay, so as you can see, we have kidney sending filtered liquid into the bladder, and then we have the accumulation of the urine. So we want to talk about different types of organs in the excretory system, starting with the skin. So the skin not only sweats water, it also sweats out salt and a small amount of urea, which helps you get rid of the waste. There's also your lung that exhale carbon dioxide and small amount of water vapor. So please don't say that carbon dioxide is a part of the nutrients that we need in our body. We don't need carbon dioxide. You need oxygen, not carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is useless for our body. So we got to breathe it out, okay? So your lung is also a part of the excretory system. There's also the liver, which converts nitrogen waste as less toxic as urea. So the reason why the liver needs to convert this nitrogen waste is because we have to hold the urine in our body for a while, right? If it's a really toxic component, then it's going to damage our body. However, in comparison, fish has a much more toxic urine because the fish do not have to hold the urine in their body. They can get rid of it all the time. So just something to think about. The next one is we have kidney, which filtrates waste and reabsorbs water in order to produce and excrete urine.